Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Thompson from Concentric here in Charleston, South Carolina. This is the 10th forum that we posted on the updates to 9000. Since late um, 2014, we've tried to have a webinar once a month or so to give you updates on the progress of the 9001 2015 standard as it's gone through its various draft stages. This will be um, recorded. It's recorded now. It'll be available on our website later this afternoon at acommoncenter.com. Just a couple general housekeeping rules here, some notes here. If you could keep, um, well, because there's so many callers, I've gone ahead and muted you, but I'll unmute as we go through. If you have questions, there's a little chat icon up at the top of your Join Me menu. So feel free to um, add a question, add a comment in there. Uh, you can convey that comment to everyone, or you can convey it just to me or to another viewer that's on the call. But the recording will be available. It'll also be on YouTube, and feel free to share this with others. Pass them, send a link, use it however you want to. The more, the merrier. We will have another forum in July. So if you're interested in signing up for that, again, it's free. We just ask you to register so we can send you the login information prior to the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am joining you this afternoon from downtown Charleston, South Carolina. We've had a pretty bumpy week. So for those of you out there that have been kind of keeping us in thoughts and prayers, I appreciate that. Without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into the presentation. So in June of 2012, there was this initial meeting and kickoff of reviewing the existing version of the 9001 2018 standard, and the projection right now is somewhere in September we will see the release and final publication of the standard. So it's about a 3-year cycle there from the initial review to the present time. So I'm going to go through the first several slides faster than normal just because past sessions we've taken a bit of a deeper dive into those. So I want to take a deeper dive into a couple of other things such as risk-based thinking and change management, some updates that have popped up over the last 30 to 60 days. So if you care to get a little bit deeper in these first few slides, what I recommend you do is just go to our website, acommoncenter.com. There's a 9001 2015 resources page, and all of the previous videos, I think from February up through the one that will be published for today, they're all on there. So feel free to go and do a deeper dive with some of this stuff by looking at those videos if you choose to do so. But just real quick, we're about to go into revision 5 of the 9001 QMS standard. There's a massive adoption of this standard globally, with somewhere around 1.2 million companies worldwide that have registered. And when you say register, what I mean that is they're actually visited by a third-party registration body and go through this third-party audit, and then they are entered or registered in in this registry that shows that they have successfully gone through that certification or registration process. This affects about 140 countries. One thing that's significant about this slide is that there haven't been really any major changes since 2000, so it's kind of like squeezing a water hose together. There's a heck of a lot of updates that are coming down the pipeline and that we're seeing in the draft that will come out later this year. So a lot of organizations in concert with 9001 also have an environmental management system standard and oftentimes a occupational health and safety standard as well. So on the EMS side, you have this 14,001 standard that's maturing and being evolved in parallel to 9001. While it's not as widely adopted, um, you still have 200,000 plus registered companies globally, and then on the 18,001, the OHSAS 18,001 side, you've got 55,000 registered companies globally, 116 countries. So one thing that's noteworthy about the 18,001 document is that at this point it's still a British standard. It's not an ISO standard, but in Q4 this year, it's projected that once this document is released, it will be released as an ISO 45,001 standard, and then the OHSAS 18,001 standard would then be retired. So a little bit about that. 14 and 18,001 standard, both of those have a 17-element structure. They're not laid out, structured the same way as 9001, but that's going to change as well, and I'll get to that in just a second. So about every 5 years or so, these standards that are published by the International Organization for Standardization, they go through this cycle where they either have to be revised, they're voted as being used as is, or the document is obsolete, it's retired. So you can see here, this is an illustration from late 2014 from Quality Digest. This is a little bit more granular look into the phases that the standard goes through as it's updated or voted to be obsolescent or as is. Now, ISO is not an organization that just has to juggle the EMS and the QMS and the OHS standard, but there's 16,500 plus standards that that organization is responsible for. 9001 is one of those at the top of the list in terms of number of subscribers. Here is a breakdown of, this is a little bit aged, but this is the latest figures I could find where there's a bit of statistics in respect to the number of certificates that are issued by country. So you can see that China is at the top. I was surprised to see Italy so high up there. Germany there kind of in the middle has the most certificates per capita based on the number of organizations and populations there. In U.S., we're down in ninth place. But I think this is an interesting illustration to show where globally the ISO 9001 standard is currently being adopted. So within each grouping of standards, there are these groups called technical committees. So TC 176 or Technical Committee 176 is the group or the committee that's responsible for oversight of the 9001 family of documents. So if you could imagine TC 176 being similar to the United Nations and a gathering of different delegates from different countries kind of around a big conference room, TC 176 has representatives from over 140 different countries, and the idea is when a draft comes out at its various stages, those delegates go back to the organizations within their country and they solicit feedback, they discuss the direction of the standard, and then they bring that survey information back to the table, and that is then used as a key input into the further refinement or changes to the revisions of the various drafts as it moves through the drafting process. If you look at this illustration here, you can see from NWIP to WD to CD1. These are the steps that are taken in terms of the standard development sequence. And right now, we've gone through this, what's called draft international standard approval. Um, that occurred November 5th of 2014. So essentially, those delegates vote, hey, do you approve the existing draft in its current state? And it's either a yay or a nay. So in November, there was approximately 90% of those delegates in TC 176 that said, yes, we approve the current state of the standard. And that's a pretty exceptional approval rating. So there's confidence in the quality circles that the standard is going to be published on time just because of the number of approvals it's received in the draft international standard phase. So let me do this before I get too much further. I'm going to pause and open the floor for some questions and comments. Any questions, comments before we get further in the presentation? Usually that means I'm doing a horrible job or an outstanding job. So I'll be optimistic today. I will say that because I don't have any questions now. All right. We'll switch on mute again and press record. Again, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to use that chat feature and ask questions. I'm happier with your feedback, your questions. I'm sure others would probably have similar questions, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into one of the latest illustrations that's been published. This came off of ISO.org. If you go to ISO.org, there's an ISO 9001 section for news and updates. This came out a month or so ago, and this illustration is showing you that we're currently in the approval stage for the final draft international standard. We're expected to see a ballot passed and kind of final voting on the final draft. And assuming that there is 75% or more approval rating, then the expectation is that the international standard will be published in September of this year. In May, there was a meeting in Lithuania by the 176 delegates, and they were basically mulling over the last merely 3,000 or so comments that had been brought to the table in terms of final fine-tuning of the standard. Imagine sitting there combing through 3,000 surveys and feedback, but that's really kind of the last stage, assuming that in July or maybe even late this month that, as I said, 75% or more approval rating is what's voted on, then we should expect this release. So as soon as the final draft international standard gets approved, what you'll see is a lot of action with consulting companies, training companies, your registrar, because at that point, it's just a matter of really sending the approved documents to the press, releasing the publications. You've got a PDF soft copy that's available to buy or whatever. So I'm looking forward to that date because that gives me and my team the green light to move forward and start working with confidence with our customers in transitioning them from 9001 2018 to the new version. So that's a mere weeks away at this point. So moving on to the next slide, there are other sectors where you have practitioners, you have registrars, you have consulting firms, major OEMs and their supply chain that are all sitting around in anticipation for the standard to be released, because their sector-specific standards then get built on top of the 9001 2015 standard. So examples of that, would be the ISO TS 16949, AS 9100, ISO 13485 for medical device, PL 9000. So these standards are currently expected, as they are today, to be added on to the top of 9001 2015. So one of the questions that came up in previous calls was, hey, what about the automotive sector? They were kind of at a standstill and not quite ready to commit to being a part of the restructuring and the re-release of 9001. So you can see here, and I'm not going to go through the details. This is actually a link that's also on our resources page. But 9001 is slated to be adopted by the International Automotive Task Force. TS 16949 will be built on top of 9001. The aerospace guys for AS 9100 came out, over a year ago and said, yes, we like the direction that 9001 is going in, so we're going to follow suit and we're going to build on top of 9001 2015. I'm not sure what's going on with automotive folks. I do a lot of work with automotive, and this sector tends to be a little bit difficult at times to deal with. But in March, they said, okay, yes, we're going to forego talks of succeeding from 9001 and hop on board and use 9001 2015 as as an update. So you can see here February 16th saying completion of the revised QMS standards targeted for Q4 2016. So those of you that are in automotive, you should expect Q4 2016 with regard to the release of what's now numbered TS 16949. It may be ISO 16949 at that point, and the TS gone. I'm not really sure, but that's a whole nother conversation, and I'll bring folks abreast as those announcements come up in future forums. So I'm going to go ahead and stop again, give you an opportunity to talk. Some folks are saying that my voice isn't very loud, so I'm talking loud and I can't get to the microphone. Feedback, questions? Okay, I'm going to press. So Annex LS. Annex LS is a very important document. And in short, Annex LS is a standard for management system standards. So the idea is, instead of having 9001 with an 8-clause structure and 14,000 and 18,000 with a 17-clause structure, and confusion as to how to integrate management systems, Annex LS says, okay, look, guys, we need a common structure. We need a common layout for management systems. So as they become updated, revised, published in the future, they should take on this layout, these clauses of 1 through 10, and it's similar, really the same layout in clause 1, 2, and 3 as to what we see now. But in terms of kind of the meat and potatoes of the standard and where the general requirements exist, those are here. So what we're seeing is instead of 5 clauses like we have now, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we've got clause 4 through 10. And each of the clauses are a bit rearranged. That's going to maybe cause a little bit of growing pains early on, hopefully not too much. But what it's going to do in the long run, which is really great, and it's something that I'm looking forward to with my customers, it's going to allow better alignment in your health and safety management system, your environmental management system, and your quality management system. So if you can imagine, let's say, having an internal auditing team for quality, and then an internal auditing team for health and safety, and then another internal auditing team for EMS, and different procedures for those 3, and different checklists for those 3. I mean, that's a lot for an organization to maintain. What it does by having Annex LS in the mix and making sure that each of the management system standards are aligned is you can have one internal auditing procedure right here that would cover all 3 systems. It just makes it much easier to audit. It makes it easier for the third-party registrars to audit, or your customers to audit, or you to audit your supply chain. It allows you to have a bit better shot at integration. So that's something that we're all about. That's where our name came from, having a common center. So we're excited about seeing that change in the alignment of the various standards for various management system standards based on the requirements of Annex LS. So what are the expectations as far as transition goes? So first and foremost, and I cannot stress this enough, I strongly recommend you now. Don't wait until next year. Don't wait until 2018 January. Start communicating right now. Like, get off the phone and send out an email or make a phone call to your registrar, whoever your account manager is, and start the dialogue now with what their expectations are in terms of transition. More importantly, what are your customers' expectations in terms of transitioning to the 2018 or the 2015 version of the standard? So the expectation is that you'll have a 3-year transition period, but if your customer says something similar to, let's say, what Daimler Chrysler said back in 2000, which is, hey, the global community says you have 3 years to transition, but if you're a tier 1 supplier to us, you only have 18 months. Well, you need to know that now. You don't want to go up to your president of the company as a quality practitioner or as a top manager and go, boss, we only have 6 months before we have to transition over because, I didn't check in with our customers. I thought that ISO gave us permission for 3 years, and oops, now we actually only have 18 months. So start that talk now and make sure that your customers and your registrar are aligned with that expected 3-year transition period. Assuming that you do have 3 years to transition, you need to transition and have your new registration to 2015 by Q4 of 2018. Don't wait until Q3 or Q4 of 2018, because I can tell you this, it's going to be, I promise you, mark my words, this is recorded, save it, come back, you know, hold me accountable to this. I guarantee you that Q2, Q3 of 2018 will be like April 15th here in the States at the post office. It's going to be a ton of people trying to get their certification transitioned over at the last minute, and there's just not going to be enough registrars. There's not going to be enough auditors. There's not going to be enough in terms of resources in order to transition all of the organizations who have waited, over to the new standard in time. So there's going to be some organizations that will have a lapse in their registration status, which, some contracts that you're working with, some customers that you're working with require this certification. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to go back to them and request that, okay, can I have a deviation to go ahead and continue providing products or services to you, even though I'm going to have this lapse for 3, 4, 5, 6 months in my ISO 9001 certification. So don't wait. Start now with that transition and avoid that bottleneck. It's going to happen, I promise you. So some highlights of the current final draft international standard. And let me put a big fat exclamation mark / stroke / footnote here. All this stuff that I'm talking about is based on the current draft. There will be some changes, but my bet is those changes will be minimal between now and September in terms of the actual requirements to the standard. Okay, so we know that there's going to be this 10-clause structure. We know that in addition to the 10 clauses, there's going to be kind of a supplemental section at the back of the standard called Annex A, B, and C. So Annex A is going to be kind of clarification of some of the terminology and requirements in the standard. Annex B will be a section discussing the QMS principles, just like we have the 8 QMS principles now. And then Annex C will be a family of standards that are used in conjunction with 9001. Okay, one of the other significant changes is this phrase of context of organization. So it's a little bit similar to what you see now in Clause 4.1, although it goes into further detail in terms of the use of this word interested parties. So the idea here, looking at this little graphic is, what do you mean when you say we are registered? What do you mean by we? Who are we? As an organization, who are you? Which processes are in-house? Which processes are external? Who are your customers? Who are your suppliers? Who are your end users? So the idea here is that you define your organization and the context of your organization so that you can ensure that those processes that you depend on, let's say externally, are being executed properly. And when you define who your customers are or interested parties are, what do you mean? Are you considering the marketplace? Are you considering new technology? Are you considering affiliates, employees? So it's a lot more comprehensive and inclusive, this requirement of context of the organization. So further on down in Clause 4, what you have is, first of all, almost like this property line is, who are you? What's the scope in which your QMS is going to be registered to? There are no exclusions or exclusions permitted in the draft standard. So like what you have now where you can exclude 7.3, there is no provision for exclusion in the new standard. You simply say this particular aspect of my QMS is being managed externally, or it doesn't apply to us. Um, but ultimately, whatever it takes for you to achieve the desired results of interested parties, um, your customers included, um, that's what you have to define. Leadership. So the term top management is now going to be shifted to this term called leadership. So in terms of leadership, there is a higher level of commitment that's going to be required for the leadership within an organization. And more importantly, um, and probably a factor in making sure that management is committed, is that you have this aspect within the new standard that conveys better in terms of improving the overall business versus just improving product quality. So there's a richer involvement in making sure that the QMS can be used to drive overall organizational excellence and organizational improvement. Um, so similar to a baseball, the quality management system should be used to hold the entire business together, and it's the structure in which um, being an excellent organization is built. One of the other key issues here under kind of the leadership section is that unlike today, um, the management representative role will not be one person. So leadership is responsible for adoption and execution of the quality management system, unlike what we have today, where the standard requires you to identify a management system representative or a quality management rep. So your QMS representative should be more than one person or your entire leadership group. So the most significant change and what's getting the most focus and what's going to take the most of shifting the paradigm for organizations will be this thing called risk-based thinking. So what could go wrong? What does go wrong? What happens if? And risk-based thinking is not just us sitting down as an organization and thinking about all the bad things that could happen, but what are the opportunities that are currently out there that we're not really capitalizing on or converting at the moment. The other thought is that you would have risk-based targets, goals, and objectives. So this whole preventive action thing, which really has been one of the weakest links that I've seen in organizations. Preventive action goes away. The term preventive action, is not very well understood anyway. And what replaces that is this phrase, risk-based thinking. So, what's the effect of failure or uncertainty on the expected result that you have? My recommendation is for organizations that don't currently have tools for analyzing risk, that you start with a simple tool like a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? When you make a change to a process or bring on a new supplier or bring on a new customer or lose a specific job function or consolidate two sites into one, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with that change? So some organizations are going to struggle with this because thinking has typically been reactive instead of proactive. So this is another, I think, very, very valuable change that comes with the 2015 vision standard. The risk is the effect of uncertainty on an expected result. That's the current definition that is published with the Draft International. So the idea here is that you look similar to a house. If you look at the layout of this house illustration here, so look at every room and think about in a risk-based thinking lens, looking out and saying what could go wrong, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, what's the probability of a fire in the kitchen, what's the probability of someone falling off the balcony. Well, okay, in that case the balcony has no railing, let's put a glass railing around it. What's the severity if um, there is a fire in the kitchen? So if there's a high severity and then there's a high probability, we need to do something to ensure that that doesn't happen, or we need to at least be deliberate about accepting that risk versus just managing by hope. So the idea is you discover problems before they get out of control. If there is no way to prevent certain risks, then what you want to do is shorten the reaction time and the problem severity if you can. You can't design out hurricanes. Hurricanes are a big concern here in Charleston because we're right on the coast. But you can shorten the reaction time. You can be proactive, and you can think in a way that if a hurricane comes and we're not able to manufacture product for a month, these are the provisions that we've planned for, and should that time come, we're prepared. So that's the general paradigm shift that some organizations that haven't felt like that before may struggle with initially. It's just another way of looking at trying to get in front of a nonconformity or failure mode versus being reactive. And if there is some sort of reactive nature to a nonconformity, at least think about how we can take the lessons learned and apply them to similar products or similar processes, so that our lessons learned are cascaded out to a sister plant or another product line. That sort of mind frame. So the idea here is proactive, just being prepared, in short. So here's another example where some organization would say, well, okay, there's a risk for child to accidentally get into the pool area, but I put a sign up on the fence. Okay, well, how effective is that? It's not very effective, especially if this little girl can't read signs. So don't just take a risk-based thinking approach, but how effective are we at executing and minimizing risk? So in this case, a much more effective approach would be to put a little magnetic locking mechanism here on the gate, so that have to be a certain height in order to get into the pool area. So here's another example with an automobile. This is a Prius, where it's much more effective. Instead of saying, hey, put your foot on the brake before you start the vehicle, let's design that failure mode out. The issue would be that car would move before you have the brake depressed. So let's design into the product using a risk-based approach, so that the car can't even start until first you put depress the brake. So it takes the probability of a failure mode down significantly because you're designing using a risk-based approach. Those of you that are in the automotive world would be familiar with this based on the requirements of FMEA and BFMEA. So where do you start with a risk-based thinking? Start macro, start big, start thinking about risk in terms of business continuity planning or contingency planning. Think really big. What are the things that could shut us down? Natural disasters, strikes, loss of key suppliers, that sort of thing. And then get down into individual process planning, specific products or roles. And once you get the momentum down, people start thinking in the lens of and what is the probability of that undesirable situation, then you can start getting um, risk-based. Obviously, there's a point of diminishing return. Thinking back to um, that illustration where the girl is standing outside the pool. There's a point in time where um, there's a point in time where it makes sense to uh, stop at the $100 magnetic mechanism versus spend $10,000 and build a brick wall um, around. Sorry guys,
Jim, we still can't hear you. Sounds like you're in a car or underneath the car.
I feel like I'm underneath the car with the tech issues today. Okay, so what I was saying is there's a point of diminishing return, obviously, on um, how how much time and resources you're going to spend on risk-based thinking, time, energy, money, that sort of thing. So that should be something that's considered as a part of your changes and uh, taking on new customers, um, that sort of thing. So if you want to read more about this particular illustration, wearethepractitioners.com is where I got this. There's a nice article about the law of diminishing return and how that kind of connects in with risk-based thinking. So some of you have already been using FMEAs. That's something that you see in automotive, aerospace, and some other sectors. Um, I like using turtle diagrams and SIPOC diagrams. I think they're very easy, similar to a SWOT analysis tool. It's very, very easy to pull folks together, put a turtle on the wall or a SWOT analysis on the wall, and get feedback from several folks within your organization because they're super easy tools. If you care to learn more about any of these tools, go to our website and search. There's a bunch of articles about different tools there. Change management. So change management is something that is going to be also kind of in the top the top few changes that might cause some growing pains. And the thought here is that if you read this little cartoon, the boss says, I'll need a project plan to justify the resources we need to change our software. And then Dilbert says, I can make those software changes in 10 seconds, and done. He makes the changes. And the boss says, good work. Now all we need is that plan. Well, what Dilbert may not be considering is what is the impact to the changes that he just made. He went off on his own and made this change to software. What other systems on the other side of that change are going to be impacted? What was the extent of the change? What was the risk of the change? You need to be thinking about what are the risks associated with my change management, and ensuring that you know what changes are connected to and what are the potential impacts. So this is some of the new language. It says where there's a need for change, and you're always going to have a need for change to some extent, the following must be considered. So what's the purpose of the change? And then this piece here is what's the potential consequence of the change? And that's where you typically come together as a cross-functional group and say, look, I think we need to go with this new supplier, but before we make that change, what are the potential consequences of going from, let's say, a supplier that's right down the street to a supplier that's 7,000 miles away? So think of the potential consequences. What is the impact to the integrity of the QMS? What types of resources are available versus resources that we might need in conjunction with the change, allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authority based on this change. Really just be, more proactive and ensure that your change management is controlled and very deliberate. So another piece is necessary knowledge. So what knowledge is going to be needed to achieve conformity? What knowledge is going to be needed as an organization to effectively operate and execute the designed processes that you have within your organization? Another piece is it's not adequate enough to just have knowledge within your organization, but you have to have access to the knowledge. So if you have sufficient knowledge, let's say in some sort of maintenance process, you probably hire that person with a certain level of technical knowledge. You probably don't have as much of a need for, say, work instructions or standard work. Work instructions, documentation, you'll see that being opened up a bit more and even less requirements than even the current standard, which is already very light in terms of documentation. And the idea there in terms of defining what is appropriate in terms of documentation and how that connects with knowledge, the thought and the question that I always kind of pose is where the absence of a document equals a nonconformity, or where the absence of a document diminishes the knowledge within a work team, then maybe you should consider having that document there as a supplement and a tool to increase the knowledge of the workers in that area. Real quick, I talked about Annex A, Annex B, and Annex C as kind of add-on pages to the standard. So Annex A is clarification. Hey guys, this is what we meant when we wrote clauses 1 through 10. Annex B is the QMS principles, which go from the current principles 1 through 8 down to 1 through 7. I'm going to breeze through these three, and then Annex C is an introduction to what's called ISO 10001, which is further guidance on quality management systems and how to use QMS documentation and standards in order to drive organizational excellence. So here's a good summary slide. According to the draft design spec, revised standards should help with system integration, be a stable core for requirements over the next 10 years, be a bit more relevant to organizations, particularly more service-oriented organizations. So instead of saying product, you'll see the terminology product and services. The idea is that you not only go through the motions on a day-to-day basis, but you focus on achieving desired results. The other thing that you'll see with the standard is that there's a lot of consideration given to technological and quality practices that have advanced over the past 15, 20, 30 years. And the standard becomes more of a tool for how to improve your operations at achieving expectations for business today versus just maybe the earlier versions where you saw the focus being placed on product quality. So it's more of a holistic standard. So again, here's an illustration showing about a 3-year transition from June 2012 to September 2015 in terms of release of the standard, and a similar 3-year cycle for moving from the release of the standard to transitioning to the new standard. So the next steps would be that approval of the final draft international standard. It's currently being reviewed, and then September is the expected publication time frame. So a couple of things that you can do and use after this webinar that are free, that are accessible at any time. If you go onto our website, you can see either right here or right here. This will take you to the page that has articles, key links, videos, registration information for future webinars, public training classes, whatever. There's a ton of stuff there. And what we do, we have about 4 or 5 people here in the office. We also have around 22 subject matter experts that are kind of all over the globe. Anytime someone finds a new article, video, email, publication, what have you, we all kind of take that information and stack it up in this 9001:2015 page so that it's a nice resource center for our customers. So feel free to check that out. It's a really good resource. One other thing that was just announced a couple of weeks ago is that we are having our first ISO 9001:2015 lead internal auditor training August 18th through the 20th. We originally had it scheduled the first one for November, but based on several customers saying we want to get trained earlier than that, we've announced that we're having this August 18th through the 20th, 8 to 5. It's in North Charleston in the Crown Plaza. For those of you in the area, that is where the Low Country Quality Conference has been held the past couple of years. If you're interested in that, this would be for today only. So by 5 o'clock today, if you're interested, contact me either by email or better yet, in your little chat bubble at the top. Give me your name and your phone number, and I'll call you after the webinar. But what I'll do is I'll give you a free promotional code. If you send 3, the 4th person is free. We'll also send you a $50 Amazon gift card after the training is complete. We'll also give you some information about lodging at our corporate partner, which is the Charleston Harbor Resort and Marina here. The cost is $129 a day at a resort versus $250 plus. And then we've got we'll give you access to the Centric Resource Library, which will have a bunch of tools, templates, forms, videos, updates. That'll be a part of the early bird deal as well. So if you're interested in that, like I said, reach out to me once this call's over. Put your information in the little chat bubble, and I'll be sure to contact you this afternoon. If you need to get a hold of us, these are the folks. I'm Jim on the top left there. We got Megan, Ronnie, and Sydney. Reach out to us. We're here to help you. We're here to point you in the right direction, even if we might not be able to help you directly. If you like Facebook, that's becoming more and more popular. People connecting that way. Twitter, LinkedIn, and then our website and our phone number. If you're in the Charleston area, we're at 266 Meeting downtown. So those are all of the various ways that you can get in touch. So with that said, I'm going to open up the floor for questions, comments, and anything that you've got. Feel free to ask that now. Go for it.
Jim, is there going to be an extra charge for the 4th day for the automotive section?
Yes. I'd be willing to talk about that. There is an extra day for that. So far we have 5 people signed up. 4 of the 5 are signed up for the final pattern session. Sorry in advance for, I guess, post webinar for the technical workshop calls. Any other questions? I will stop the recording now, and I'll stay on
Jim, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I can't hear hardly a word you're saying.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, somebody's not on mute. There we go. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Yeah, so when I unmute folks, if they're not on mute, it gets kind of loud. So sorry for that. Any other questions?
I didn't hear your answer about the charge for the 4th day.
Oh, gotcha. If you want to, in the little chat bubble deal, put your email or put your telephone number. I'll circle back around after I hang up, and I can talk to you about that if you're interested.
Sure.
Okay. Any questions about changes or where you might be able to find more information or any questions at all? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll hang out here for a few minutes if you do have additional questions.